you like lots of amplifiers? You want to try out a bunch of different cabs? Well, my name is Joe Gamble, and I'm back again to present quite the humdinger to you today, and it's got a name. It's called the Fryette Zmacs 4x4. And just what is a zMAX 4x4, you might ask? Well, wading into the shallow end and at its core, it is a multi-amp, multi-cabinet switching system that allows you to switch between 4 amps and 4 cabs and mix and match between them all while solving all of the impedance issues that you might imagine would crop up with such a thing. All because it sports a programmable impedance matching transformer that is so supercalifragilistic that it actually has a patent out for it. It also gives you 2 different loops that you can run any or all of the amplifiers through to 2 different attenuators. So that could be attenuators of different makes, models, or it could be 2 power stations if you like. Yeah, so then we have these 2 external switching controls that you can set up to either toggle between the channels on your channel switching amps, or you can set up one or both of these to flip back and forth between the 2 modes and volume settings on the PS100. All right, so maybe you're running your deliverance with the zMAX in the PS100 and you're cranking the damn thing up, okay? So you're gonna run that through one of the modes of the PS100 to bring the volume down to manageable levels. And then maybe you wanna run your Lidl ether into the zMAX and use the other mode of the PS100 to bring that volume up to match the deliverance. And then you get to choose which cab you run the amps through, or maybe you wanna use multiple cabs because you're an insane person. But either way, you can do that because the zMAX is taking care of all the impedance matching hassle, getting rid of that and allowing you to juggle all this stuff with just a couple of buttons to push. So now the whole dang thing is programmable and MIDI controllable, but you can also toggle between settings with a pedal like this. But most of all, you got to know that everything is accessible and easy to run just from the front panel alone. But then check this out. You can actually link as many of these units together as you'd like. So theoretically, if you had 4 zMAX, you could run 16 amps, 16 cabs, and 8 different attenuators and control it all with just a tap of your smelly old Chuck Taylor. Sounds great, doesn't it? As you can imagine, there's a lot of shenanigans we can get up to, detailing usage scenarios and things like that, and we're definitely going to do that in future videos. But for now, we just want to take a little bit closer look at the heart of the zMAX, and in particular, this programmable impedance matching transformer, and just what it's doing for us in the zMAX. So now if you're kind of new to this great wide world of guitar gear, it might seem like a good and obvious idea, you know, to say, hey, I really like this amp that normally plugs into cabinet A, but I want to plug that into cabinet B that amp B normally plugs into, and then I want to take amp B and plug that into cabinet A and see what's going on, right? Or like me when I visit the Fryette shop, you know, and I'm playing through a deliverance and I'm demoing 4 different cabs, and I'm just saying, man, I wish I could play this amp into the Deliverance 412 and the Sound City 412, and then I'd be in heaven. Maybe I want to take my great old Super Reverb and try that out through a closed-back cab, or I want to take my Plexi 50 watt and play that through this 212 that's loaded with Fanes and see what's up there. So, you know, it seems like it would be pretty simple, you know, just like, you know, making your bologna sandwich with rye instead of Wonder Bread, or, you know, putting vodka in your martini instead of gin. But in guitar land, it's a little more difficult than that, and we have to adhere to these recipes that involve a little bit of math and understanding a couple terms, what an ohm is, or the ohm rating. Now, what is an ohm? Well, I'm just a dumb guitar player, but an ohm is a unit of electrical resistance between 2 points of a conductor when a constant potential difference of 1 volt is applied to those points and a current of 1 amp is produced. So clearly we don't need to know any of this stuff to play guitar, but once we start plugging our amps into different speakers and changing cabs and plugging into boxes our amps weren't originally designed to see, then we need to pay closer attention to this ohm stuff. We might wind up cooking our gear. So in standard guitar land operating procedure, you can't set your amp to a higher ohm rating than the speaker or speakers that you're plugging into. Okay, so 8 ohm amp into 8 ohm cab, fine. 8 ohm amp into 16 ohm cab, A-okay. 16 ohm amp into 8 ohm cab, that's a no-no, and we don't do that. In a future video, I'll show you how to track down this stuff on the back of a cab that maybe isn't marked clearly with this information, because this is something that you should know how to do, but for most purposes, all of this stuff is located easily next to the speaker jacks on the back of your amp and your cabinet like this. And in yet another upcoming video, we're going to have an in-depth interview with Steve about this transformer design that they came up with, as well as exploring the possibilities, tips, tricks, and even some secret functionality within the zMAX that makes it even more fun and interesting to use. So I'll just say that for me right now, like an obvious application for the zMAX would be running Eric Johnson style rigs in a live situation, and that'll be just killer, right? But I also think in the studio, this is going to be just an incredible tool for people who own a lot of different amplifiers and need a central hub to run everything through, and they can have quick and speedy access to all their stuff. The workflow will be a lot faster. And then for people like me, check this out. You can run a load box in one of the cab loops, like the PLIR. So for someone like me, who I can't have live amp volume going on all times of the day, and yet I still have deadlines. So I can set up a stack of amplifiers here, run them through the zMAX, have the PLIR in a cabinet loop, and then just be changing out IRs on that unit to get all my recording work done. That is going to be invaluable. So I just feel like the zMAX gives us and me this embarrassment of riches and possibilities for the work types and environment that I prefer. So I'm super stoked. But before we wrap this up and I drool all over this thing, I want to show you quite possibly my favorite aspect of the zMAX, and that is just how easy it is to set up and work with. And this is just really, really cool stuff.
So you're going to want to plug your guitar into the front panel of the zMAX using the input jack. And then for each amp you want to use, you'll have one instrument cable running out of the zMAX into the input of the amp. And then you'll take a speaker cable out of the amp and back into the zMAX. And if we're connecting an attenuator, I'll use a speaker cable coming out of one of the zMAX send jacks into the amp in jack of the power station, and then take a speaker cable out from the speaker out jack of the power station and run that back into the return jack of the same loop on the zMAX. And even though we won't go too deeply into it in this video, let's go ahead and connect the first external switch to the PS100 so it can control the dual mode switching on that unit, and then we'll set up the external 2 switch to turn on the effects loop of the PS100 on and off.
All right, so now let's look at how easy this front panel is to use. And it's simply the most straightforward and simple piece of gear I've ever had the pleasure of dealing with ever. Am I exaggerating? Possibly, but still, it's cool.
So the deliverance is amp number 1, and that's running at 16 ohms. We're going to select that, and the deliverance cab is cab number 1. It's also running at 16, so boom, boom. Amp number 2 is the garage plexi. That's running at 8 ohms. We're going to select it there. And the garage cab is cab number 2. That's also running at 8. The ether, amp number 3, is also running at 8 ohms, as is its 112 cab. If we want to add the power station in the mix, we'll select it with this loop button. And if we want to toggle between the volume modes of the PS, hit this. Now, if we want to run 2 cabs at once, check this out. Hit these 2 buttons. Pow!
All right, so I can just sit here and manipulate things, on the front panel if I like. Or I can toggle between 2 modes with a simple foot switch, or I can program things with the MIDI foot switch. And that's really simple. So like maybe the first patch I want to design is just using the deliverance rig, right? So what I'll do is I'll select amp 1, cab 1, and then I'll choose to use the PS100 in this patch. And so what I'm going to do is select the button on the MIDI controller that I want to use. Let's take 1. I'm going to hit store here to write it to memory, and then we're ready to go. So no digging through menus on a little screen or anything like that. Just a little boop, 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 and then you're ready to go. Mixing and matching tones and hopefully making some passable music in the process. All right, well that's it for this time. Thanks for watching. There's a lot more coming, and we'll see you in the next one.